Yeah, I'm Italian. I got to talk with my hands, but my focus on the.
Nah, you're good. You're good. Okay. Well,
Yeah.
I guess we can just go ahead. So, hi.
Okay.
What is your name?
Okay.
Where you're from? I guess like how old are you, and what's your connection with Taiwan?
Okay, Evan, you asked me all that before, and this is my basic data. Okay.
Okay.
So you can see right there, my English name is Linda Gail Arrigo, otherwise Italian Arrigo. My father was conceived in Sicily, and he spoke Sicilian when he was a little kid. But he was Americanized, he went into the military, and then it became Arrigo. Okay, so it's from my father being in the military that I was able to come to Taiwan at age 14. But even before that, I started learning Chinese on my own because I was interested from a very young age. So I started learning Chinese at age 12 in San Francisco. And then I got my Chinese name, which I have till now, which is Ai Ling Da. Now, I is not love, okay? It's not Ai Qing Da Ai, even though when I go to give talks, they sometimes write it wrong. It's Eisenhower, the I. It's the I from Eisenhower, okay, which is a grass head and then a X. Okay, so it's a pretty easy character. So Ai Ling Da. And then Linda is obviously English, and Taiwanese cannot pronounce Gail. But I do have a very small number of Taiwanese friends who call me Gail occasionally, as my family used to call me Gail. Okay, so I was born in 1949, January 16. I just passed my 76th birthday, and I have to say I'm feeling it. Okay, now I can really feel my age. I'm not as spry as I was hoping I would be, but I used to really hike slowly, but hike like over the hills around my area, and so part of hiking in the hills is you get to see old farmhouses and things. And as I remember Taiwan, I really remember as it was when I came in 1963. Okay, so back to my father. So my father was he was sent after Europe, a while after, he was sent to the Korean War when I was just 2. And then he was sent to, Korea, Japan. He came back to the U.S. for a while. My parents were divorced. He enrolled in the military again, and he was sent to Taiwan. So my father was in Taiwan about I'm not quite sure the year, about 1959. And I actually have a picture of my father, which I hope you can put online.
Ooh,
My
of course.
father shaking hands, which would be neat, I'll send it to you, which was my father shaking hands with Madam Chiang Kai-shek, who always shakes the hands, and then Chiang Kai-shek is standing right next. On July 4th, 1960, and Chiang Kai-shek is reviewing a line of American military officers on Kinmen Island. Okay, so if you remember, there was the 1958, and I forget exactly what it was, but I think it was 1958, there was a PRC bombardment of Kinmen Island. And Kinmen Island has always been the famous outpost of the Republic of China, like they still claim that they're going to retake China. Well, anyway, so my father was in Taiwan for 2 years. Then he came back to the U.S. as a little bit of a Miss Saigon story, that he had a young woman waiting for him, 30 years younger than he was. So I'll send you some pictures from early Taiwan. So I went with my father to Taiwan in summer of 1963. And my father said we were just going to stay for 2 months. But then when I got there, we went by military, free airplane with the military. And I got there, and then I found, he had his Chinese girlfriend, who was from Shanghai, the old Shanghai group with Chiang Kai-shek.
Yeah.
And he had all his military friends, and then we stayed for 5 years.
Oh, okay.
And I went to Taipei American School, and then
TAS.
it took me about 6 months, and I got pretty good in Chinese.
Nice.
And then after I got pretty good in Chinese, I started to see things differently. Gee, you're not even asking me questions. I can tell you all this, right? It's very,
That's
very
great.
easy
Yeah.
to do. So, yeah. So 1963. That's probably about when your parents were born, right?
Probably a bit later. Yeah.
Probably a bit later. Yeah. Well, so 1963 is very Chiang Kai-shek.
Mm-hmm.
Very KMT. There's military all over the streets. Double 10. I always remember Double 10 Day in 1963. We lived near National Taiwan University. There were like tanks rumbling down Roosevelt Road.
Yeah.
And the whole place was shaking from tanks going down Roosevelt Road with big placards, big billboards, like destroy the communists, and kind of gory pictures of destroying the communists. So those are pretty scary days in Taiwan, like the 1960s. And I did meet a few dissident students, slightly dissident, and some of the foreign, the Chinese, the overseas Chinese from Southeast Asia, who told me a little more about what was going on in the world. But in Taiwan, you really couldn't find out much, except I was going to Taipei American School, so I got to read John Fairbanks. John Fairbanks was banned in Taiwan. Okay, you got that?
Banned?
Because John Fairbanks gave a pretty honest account of why Chiang Kai-shek lost China, right? And that was considered like communist propaganda in Taiwan. Okay, you have any questions here now?
So I guess going way back to when you just started, you said you had a predilection for Chinese at the young age of 12. So I guess what inspired / motivated that?
Well, that's a good question. But the thing is, when my father was in Korea and Japan, and then later in Taiwan, he would send us kids. Now we never saw him, right? Because he was in Asia, right? We didn't see him for years and years, and that was kind of okay because we didn't care that much.
Right.
Our mother was very nice. But he would send all these beautiful things from Asia. At that time, I was really taken, with brush painting. And there's a picture of me at age 2 wearing a little Korean outfit. At age 2, I can send you.
Yeah,
and so I was quite taken at a young age. Plus, we had a Chinatown in San Francisco, which is nothing like now, okay, because now Chinese people are all over the place. But in those days, we had Chinatown in San Francisco, and I used to love to go to Chinatown and see these exotic things. Of course, they spoke Cantonese, but at that time I didn't really know the difference. But I was just really taken with how exotic it was. Now, the other aspect, which I read about in my biography and elsewhere, is I was going to Catholic school. And, Catholic school is big on missionaries. And then, and we used to read all these anti-communist missionary stories like Tom Doolittle, okay, which later on we found he's a CIA agent. But, in those days we thought, oh, wonderful medical guy, right? Sacrificing himself for the heathen Vietnamese. And aside from that was the election of John Kennedy. Okay, so the election of John Kennedy in 1961, he was elected. And that was a big deal because for a Catholic to become president, before Catholics were kind of like those poor Spanish countries, they're poor because they're Catholic. That was the kind of theme at the time, Protestants are superior to Catholics.
Yeah. So
although Kennedy came from a rich family, but he was calling for social justice. He was calling for U.S. leadership in the world. Okay, this is other things. So John Kennedy had this line that Americans should spread science and education and democracy to the rest of the world. And I was in Catholic school, and I really ate it up. That's probably enough. You get the point there, right? Yeah. I really ate it up. So I don't know. This probably probably at age 13, 12, 13, kind of fixed my life goals and direction. And then also it was the time of civil rights. And I came to the conclusion at age 13 that you have to marry somebody from another country. You have to experience another culture in order to really understand what's going in the rest of the world.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's great.
Okay. So at age 13, I already had that intention. I went to the Japanese tea garden a little before my father and I left for Taiwan. And I opened up 3 fortune cookies, and every fortune cookie said, "You are going to be married soon."
Oh, okay.
I was 13.
Interesting.
Okay, that's pretty funny, right?
Yeah, it's pretty funny.
Yeah, I was married soon, but I was going, right?
Yeah, soon as in not that soon.
Yeah.
Right? It's just
I
see what you mean though.
You see what I mean? I had 8 years of Catholic school.
Yes.
Okay, so 8 years of Catholic school is not really good for the psyche. It's not really good for your future sexual relations. Right. But anyway, I got over it.
So then I guess like to your experience at TAS or Taipei American School, like I guess I read on the bio synopsis that you graduated as a valedictorian. I guess this doesn't have anything to do with it, but
I got $500 from the U.S. Embassy.
Oh, actually, U.S. dollars.
I
nice.
got valedictorians. I got $500. That was a lot of money in those
days.
Yeah,
it definitely was.
For my tuition.
Oh wow. Yeah. So I guess reflecting on your experience there, did you like have any struggles? I guess because to my knowledge, did.
Wait a minute, the cat's going to go support.
It's all good.
They do that occasionally. I hope it doesn't cut off the line.
It's fine. Yeah. Are students at TAS are mainly like Taiwanese, right? Or like how?
No. We're talking Taipei American School.
Yeah.
Now it's virtually an Asian school.
Yeah, that's why
it's like 80-90% Asian, right?
Yeah.
But to go to Taipei American School, you still need to have a foreign passport. So look, we're two generations
when
later.
You went there, were they mainly like white
military
people?
Brats. It's military brats.
I see.
It started out as military brats,
okay,
and then we had 20%. We had a few businessmen. Now it's all business.
Mm-hmm.
But in those days, we had a few businessmen and the children of businessmen. And then a lot of the military brats were the children of intelligence people.
So did you enjoy your time there, I guess?
Huh?
Did you enjoy your high school experience?
No, I didn't.
Oh, okay.
I didn't. I was, okay, now I have to get one other point. We had about 20-25% of the students were daughters, but not sons, daughters of government officials or some important rich people. A few Taiwanese, but almost all the children of mainlander officials, because boys would have to go to military service.
Right.
So American school was not recognized by the government. But my experience was not good. I was, I guess, 1965, I was voted most intellectual girl.
Wow.
And then I got like a literary prize and Chinese language prize and stuff. But no, my experience was not really good because I really made an effort to go into Taiwan life. I mean, I would spend my days after school. I would go tramping through the seedier areas of Taipei or around American schools. That was in Shilin at that time, not in Tianmu. The school used to flood quite often, but we had lots of temples nearby. So I used to hang out in temples and walk around downtown where there were a lot of brothels.
Right.
And that was quite shocking for me for some times, but you also learned a lot, right? Brothels with streets filled with young military guys and women out behind bars like a meat market.
Yeah.
And then also among my classmates were the daughters of Claire Chennault. Claire Chennault, the famous Flying Tiger guy.
I do not know who that is.
You don't know who it is?
No.
Oh, you got to look up your
All right, I will.
Claire Chennault was an older, retired he married a woman who was kind of like Madame Chiang Kai-shek, okay? She in Watergate, I'm trying to remember her English name. So Chennault, Anna Chennault.
Anna, I see
Chennault.
her.
She was in with Kissinger.
Yes.
And with Nixon, and then she went to China, right?
Right.
Anna Chennault, and then she was involved with the Watergate deal. Okay, so yeah, I went to the home of Anna Chennault a few times.
Okay.
And Anna Chennault was totally paranoid that her daughters would be kidnapped by communists, even though they were in Taiwan. This kind of anti-communist paranoia. So with her and a lot of other places, I ran into this anti-communist paranoia. And after I was in Taiwan about 2 years or 3 years, I began to understand that the mainlanders were just like a thin crust on the society. And they were dictators, and they looked down on the Taiwanese. They looked down on the Taiwanese. And of course, at that time, I really didn't understand Taiwanese. But I did understand that the mainlanders and Chiang Kai-shek was a dictator. I did understand that. You could see the military on the street, all the anti-communist paranoia. Can you believe it? The mainlanders blamed the Americans for them getting kicked out of China. They blamed the Americans for being too pro-communist and letting Chiang Kai-shek get kicked out of China. Okay, so I knew that from my father's Shanghai girlfriend and their family. That they had this kind of paranoia. So really, my introduction into Taiwan was from the mainlanders in Taiwan, but seeing how fake and insecure they were, and ready to run away at any time. Yeah, I have a lot more I could talk about that, but that was real. So I'm very interested in like the Chinese Civil War,
right?
Because I met soldiers who had been shanghaied, who were in the Chinese Civil War, who hated Chiang Kai-shek. A lot of them really hated Chiang Kai-shek because they were kidnapped from their homes.
Right.
So that's another story. A lot of them, of course, later became political prisoners, and I met them as political prisoners, people who complained about being kidnapped.
I see. Well, then, I guess back to like post high school, I read that you went to Taidat and then you went to UCSD, and
right. I went to UCSD.
I observed
so let's don't skip over too much. So I met a friend, the son of a friend of my father, who was in the Rotary Club. He's Taiwanese, very, very Taiwanese. And I really thought, okay, the Taiwanese are the real people holding Chinese culture, not the mainlanders.
Yeah.
They're westernized or elitist. And if you want to understand Chinese society, you have to understand peasants, understand the land. So I married Taiwanese, basically. I planned to marry Taiwanese, and my father didn't like that, and so we eloped to U.S.
I see.
Okay, now I'm in the U.S. Now I'm at UCSD.
So I guess, like, I do notice that when you come to the U.S., or I guess come back to the U.S., it was, like, at the height of the hippie movement. Do I understand that correctly?
Yes. Well, you could say hippie movement, anti-war. What I see it is not just as hippies, but anti-war.
So, like, how was, like, that college experience as like a Taiwanese American-Taiwanese?
Right. Well, that was much more formative for me. But of course, I was still, I'm basically still an American from the anti-war movement.
I see.
So one thing also being in Taiwan until 1968, when I came back, 1963 to 68, is I had some indirect knowledge of what was going on in Vietnam.
I see.
And met some of the R&R soldiers. And from that, I really understood that it was a fiasco.
Right.
And that the U.S. was supporting a dictatorship. I mean, just indirectly, right?
Yeah.
The way they talked about killing goops.
Right.
And I was reading all this anti-insurrection. I was reading all the material in the military post library about anti-communism, and relating that also to the Chinese I knew. I just knew this is a lot of fake. This is a lot of hysteria, and it's an excuse for supporting a dictatorship.
Right.
And then I did meet these guys who came back from Vietnam, Americans who were coming to Vietnam for R&R, and they're really spaced out. And so that I knew a lot more about it than most people in the U.S., right?
Yeah.
Even though the news was all censored. The news was totally censored, but I still had more of a feel for what was going on. So when I came back to UCSD was a really active anti-war campus.
Yeah.
And in fact, there was one kid who burned himself to death in the center of the squad.
Wow.
In the center of the university. Now, was he unbalanced or what? But he burned himself, and you could see the ashes in the middle of the quad. I was there before they cleaned it up, and he burned himself in protest over the bombing of Cambodia.
Wow.
With good reason,
yeah,
right? I mean, that's a totally illegal,
so
internationally illegal.
I guess
action.
like, do you have these like I guess liberal activism, if you will, have these experiences like influenced / inspired your future like activist?
Yeah, no, that pretty much determined my direction.
Right. So you're like, hey, I agree with this. Yeah. This is how I want to. So okay, that's great. I mean,
that pretty much. But then that was a very active movement at the time.
Yeah.
Plus the feminist movement at the same time.
So
1968. When
I guess how have you like brought these experiences / what you learned back to Taiwan?
Nobody listens. No, I have. And just the thing is, now to the Taiwanese, you're the great hero who did, who saved our heroes from death, right? Or saved our heroes from long imprisonment. And nobody wants to listen to the issue of the U.S. supporting dictators like Chiang Kai-shek, like Park in Korea, and No in Vietnam and South America.
Yeah.
No, the Taiwanese, they don't want to hear that. And the Taiwanese have become more conservative. But you got to know, the two guys who tried to assassinate Jiang Qingguo in New York in 1970s, Peter Huang, he was inspired by the Students for a Democratic Society. Yeah. So they were very leftist, very anti-imperialist. And even Professor Chen Wencheng, who was thrown off the library and killed in 1981, he was a member of a leftist group, or he was very close with a leftist underground group. I know, because I was at his house a few months before he came back to Taiwan and he was killed. Okay, so Taiwanese now want to deny. They want to deny this earlier history, and they support Trump. I mean, I tell you, it makes me sick. I mean, it just makes me sick to see Taiwanese people supporting Trump. And we'll see what happens, right? But
yeah.
Taiwanese do not in the least understand or have any feeling for this past history of what the U.S. has done in the world.
So I guess, what would you want to say to the Taiwanese in regards to this matter?
I don't want to talk about it now. It's just too painful. It's been. I'll get critical later. Okay.
Okay. Sure.
It's just they did not take the chance when they could have. Okay. They did not understand the duplicity of the U.S. And of course, you can't offend the U.S. They're stuck. Okay.
Yeah.
The Taiwanese are stuck. We'll talk about that later.
Okay. Sounds good. Then looking through the synopsis, trying to go in order here. Let's see.
Historical is easier for people to understand. I came to Taiwan then in 1968, June.
So then I guess after Stanford, did you go back to Taiwan?
Yeah, so I was in Taiwan for 5 years. I eloped with my first husband, George. We had a cute little boy who's now in his 50s, right? And my God, he supports Trump. I just, it's like an anthem for me. And Taiwanese American, right? Okay, so when I came back, I finished college at UCSD. Then I went to grad school at Stanford. Yeah. And at grad school at Stanford was a very conservative place, and I had some conflicts with my professors. But they knew when I was accepted at Stanford, I got a letter that you are rated number 1 among 400 applicants.
Wow, congrats.
Wow. Well, let me turn off the light here. I think I better turn it off. I'm very proud of that.
Nice.
And I was the second, and then a few years later, I was the second student deported, a second student thrown out of the graduate school in the last few years. So I have a lot of firsts there, right?
It's okay. We don't need to go in detail there. Unless you want to.
We can't go into detail. The thing is, I thought I had intellectual freedom, and I was very critical of what they were trying to shove down my throat, which is a modernization theory, which at that time, modernization theory was widely accepted.
Right.
And in my oral exam, I said, modernization theory is the apologetics for the failures of U.S. imperialism. And probably pretty much then, it's okay, we're not gonna pass you.
Yeah.
But I was a little unrealistic in thinking that I could have such different views. There were also a lot in my year when I was at Stanford. I went in 1973. There were quite a few minority students, like blacks, Chicanos, and most of them graduated, but lots of them felt the same way I did. This is conservative, right-wing ideology being forced down our throats.
Yes, it's good that you spoke out, right? Advocated for the perceived correct
Well, it's
thing.
not so good. I lost my scholarship.
Hey, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
I didn't really realize I was speaking out. Okay.
It's okay.
I was naive.
Your actions were well justified.
I'm glad you say that.
Yes.
But this is 50 years after the fact, 30 years after the fact. But I was left with my Rockefeller Ford research money. But I lost all my other funding, so it was kind of painful. And then I also left my husband. He's a really nice guy, but I wanted to do more interesting things with my life.
I see.
And
so then I guess you met Shih Ming-teh afterwards, correct?
About a year and a half later.
Okay, so like
but basically, I left my husband. I went for my field work in 1975, and then I really came down on saying, okay, so American companies. It was my experience from my research. American companies are using Taiwan cheap labor, and so they support this martial law regime. Mm-hmm. I've got an article on this, okay?
Yes.
And the electronics, that's called multinational corporations, and it basically explains how the KMT security agency apparatus intertwined, or would you say was interlaced with the American company personnel structure.
Yeah.
And so they could control, using the unions, the so-called unions, they could surveil and control the factory workers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, basically that. And the Americans basically knew, but they didn't want to talk about it, that they were using martial law to keep the workers in line. Okay. But of course, the workers were still doing better. They're getting more income. They're getting chances to leave the village. Women are making money. Mm-hmm. They're changing their life chances. Correct. So you have to look at everything in two different sides.
Yes.
But basically, my experience in the factory research, the factory girl research, really convinced me that I should look at and should join the democratic movement. And I already knew the democratic movement from the overseas Taiwanese people. I had met Kang Ningxiang when he came to San Francisco through our local Taiwanese group. So I knew the Taiwanese Americans at that time. With my husband, we were part of the Bay Area Taiwanese Americans. Mm-hmm. And there's one particular group which was called Xie Taiwanese Alliance for Interculture, which was the more outspoken and the more militant group in San Francisco. So that was from them I met the opposition. But I have to say that the Taiwanese American life, and you're going to feel close to home in this, like getting the good job, buying the nice house on installment, big empty houses because they wanted to buy as big as possible houses for real estate investment, but not spend a lot of money on decoration. At that time, they didn't have a lot of money. Yeah. They were using houses to take advantage of everything they could.
Right.
Of having a good job in the U.S.
Yes.
And a large part of them had defense-related jobs, tech jobs, of course, engineers, and mostly like engineers and research, some professors, some medical. But it was just totally boring to me. Okay, so that's actually a big reason why I left my sweet first husband. Is, his ideal was, okay, we buy a house. He has his engineering job, which was also had security clearance for his engineering job at Lockheed.
Lockheed Martin.
So indirectly, I learned some things about American security systems. Right. We got interviewed. I got an FBI interview. Come on, Kat, get off the keyboard. Okay. Sorry. I don't know what happened there. Okay, I think we're back.
Yeah, we're good.
Okay, so I did indirectly learn a lot about the American military industrial complex through my husband's job, and I just found it totally boring to be part of the Taiwanese American community, and creating nice Taiwanese food on the vacation times and taking care of the relatives when they come from the States and helping them migrate. I learned some Taiwanese for that sake. Okay, so you got a picture, since all your listeners there in the U.S. Are part of this American life, right?
Yeah.
And what I really realized is this generation, they're extremely dedicated to Taiwan. We know they're extremely dedicated, as I found out in 1980. And they do love their country. But they know, like, zilch. They know zilch about what is happening in the U.S. They know zilch about what is happening in the rest of the world.
Right, so I
that's
guess
how they come out.
you would encourage the younger generation to explore more about actual politics and look behind.
You really have to get out of the U.S. You have to get out of Taiwan. You have to get out of the U.S. You have to go someplace like the Philippines, where they speak English.
Yes.
And they have been subjected to U.S. imperialism.
Right.
They didn't get democracy from that.
It's really interesting. It has it's the term, I don't know if it's used in anthropology as well, but social practices, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, social practices, but political mentality.
Yes.
Okay, so the Filipinos are really very sharp. Unfortunately, it's a little dangerous to go to the Philippines now.
Yes.
Okay?
Unfortunately,
it's a little dangerous, but, the Philippines and India, those are really good places to go to understand world affairs much better. The Filipinos, because they are really practicing, they're really practicing, social uprising.
Yeah.
And they really have a history, and they write about it in English.
I guess.
So I learned a lot from the Filipinos.
Right.
I have learned a lot from the Filipinos, especially from one of their intellectuals who was in the States, exiled at the same time I was, and that's Walden Bellow. Bellow, B-E-L-O-O. He was in the legislature later. Okay, we should get back to a little more consecutive background here.
I guess.
So I was really bored with Taiwanese American life, and I said, I got to get out of here. And Taiwan, the democratic movement.
Right.
A 1975 trip, I met a lot of people. I could see it's developing, and then there was a crackdown, right? So that was really the background for how I kind of accidentally left my husband.
It sounds good. I guess you mentioned a really interesting point that I had already had a planned question about, which was you said that the younger generation of the Taiwanese Americans are very dedicated to Taiwan. I guess I
didn't say the younger, I said the older generation.
Oh.
The younger ones I don't quite know.
Okay. Oh, my bad. Older. Okay, so have you noticed like a shift between perceptions towards the KMT like throughout your life from Taiwanese and Taiwanese Americans, American-Taiwanese?
Well, there's a pretty much huge shift, but of course I know the Taiwanese Americans, and I really don't know the mainlanders that much. I know the mainlanders in Taiwan, but we have had such a huge shift within Taiwan, because when I was young in Taiwan, it was really clear who is a mainlander. They're either somebody rich in a black car, and I did go and teach English a few times to these really rich KMT officials, okay? And that really also opened my eyes. They were like still living in the Qing dynasty, okay? The ones I knew, like Anna Chenault and Zhou Zero. It was like they were still in the Qing dynasty. Right. And they looked like, at the Taiwanese, like these are the laboring coolies beneath our
plebeians.
Feet.
Yes.
Yeah, and the security agencies, as I saw later, they treated Taiwanese like these are the ants beneath our feet.
So what do you think caused such a socioeconomic change?
Well, just generations. Right. I mean, because so many of the mainlanders went to the U.S. How many years we're talking about? We're talking 1963 till now.
Right.
We're talking 60 years, right?
Right.
Right? Okay, so we've already passed, 2 or 3 generations. So what I always talk about demographically, because the mainlanders had such a refugee mentality, they really tried to get out of Taiwan. They tried to get their kids. They were the earlier migrants to the U.S.
Yeah. They
got their kids out, and then they were able to get green cards and migrate themselves. And so the first periods of migration, as you saw in my article, patterns of personal and political life, the first waves of migration from Taiwan were mostly mainlanders.
Wealthy mainlanders.
Fleeing Taiwan or, sending their kids for study in the U.S.
Yeah.
And then it was like the mid-'60s and the late 60s that the brain drain for the Taiwanese started. Yes. And Taiwanese many from rather poor backgrounds, who had gotten very, very smart, got into National Taiwan University, and then went to the U.S. Right. So the Taiwanese associations were formed in the U.S. in 1970 and 1971.
So
that's very important.
These Taiwanese associations, what impact have you seen them have throughout the years?
They had really a very strong impact but Chinese wherever they go form associations based on their language dialect and based on their place of origin. So a Tongxianghui in itself is not that unusual, right?
Yeah.
Except that the Taiwanese formed Tongxianghui, and the mainlanders didn't really form separate organizations of that sort for different provinces. They did have like the KMT founded organizations,
Right.
but nobody was too enthusiastic about those. And the Tongxianghui, like 1970-71, basically became the base for the Taiwan independence movement in the U.S.
Okay.
Okay, so I know this very well because, you know, I knew all these people. And I knew a lot of them in 1960s and 70s, and then I knew them in the 1980s after the Kaohsiung incident.
Yeah.
Much better because I traveled in the whole country. And yeah, so the Taiwanese associations really mostly Mingnanhua, speaking Mingnanhua, a little bit of Kejia, but not that much.
Right.
The Mingnan speaking, the Taiwanese speaking associations really formed the basis for the Overseas Taiwanese Independence Organization. When they first started forming, the KMT tried to infiltrate and control them, but they failed, okay? So we have to say we have to give a lot of credit to the World United Formosans for Independence and other Taiwanese organizations that fought off the infiltration of the KMT. You know, just in those days, just speaking in Taiwanese dialect was seditious, was considered seditious.
Right.
You know, and the schools and everything you were not allowed to. Taipei all spoke Mandarin.
Right.
Okay, so we're saying what is the big difference? So you're going back to the 60s, it was really clear who was mainlander and who was Taiwanese. The next generation is already not so clear. Huge numbers of the mainlanders have left. The educated mainlanders, their next generation, a huge portion of them left. The mainlanders who were left were more those mainlanders who had married Taiwanese women. And so their children had a little different mentality.
Yeah.
And not totally, but a little different mentality. And then by the third generation, it's like the Taiwanese have been assimilated to speaking Mandarin. Young people in Taiwan now, most of them don't speak very good Mandarin.
Yeah.
I mean, excuse me,
right,
they don't speak very good Taiwanese.
Yeah.
They speak Mandarin, especially in the north. If they live in the south, maybe they speak better Taiwanese.
Yeah.
But, you know, in Taipei,
my cousins don't know Hokkien, and they don't know Taiwanese.
Yeah, they don't speak Hokkien, right? They speak Mandarin.
Yeah.
And then the third generation mainlanders,
Yeah.
they don't feel the same about China like their grandparents did.
Right.
So they're kind of all merged and assimilated, right?
Yeah, I understand that.
Right, you understand. So, but 3 generations later, you know, kind of like almost everybody's Taiwanese.
Yeah.
Except for those who want to go and connive with China.
Yeah.
Well, we can't say there's not still mainlanders. There's still mainlanders. There's still some of this elite culture in Taiwan. We can talk about that later, what the changes are. But of course, I mean, democratization, it changed a huge amount.
Yeah.
It changed the ethos. It changed the environment. You know, we're living in a much better society now, and people don't have those knee-jerk reactions the way they used to.
Yes.
Not nearly the way they used to.
Yes.
I have kind of a knee-jerk reaction against mainlanders, but, you know, generally not that much. My third husband was a mainlander.
I see.
He was my third husband was a mainlander, but he was a member of a Taiwanese independence organization.
Oh, wait.
An underground Taiwanese. Can you believe that?
So was he personally, on the personal level, was he a mainlander or not? Well,
he's really a mainlander. He looks like a mainlander. Okay. He's got a big Hunan face, you know. But on the personal level, I mean, he spoke several dialects. He spoke Hakka. He spoke Taiwanese. He was living in a Taiwanese environment all the time.
Yeah.
And he joined an underground Taiwanese independence organization.
So I guess you say that all these Taiwanese American organizations had very strong impact. I guess currently, what impacts can Taiwanese American communities make, organizations make?
Let's leave that for the end, okay?
Let's leave that for the end. Sounds good.
I don't think there's much they can do now, but let's leave that for the end.
Sounds good.
After we talk about the Kaohsiung incident.
Sure, yeah, that was it. The next thing. To those that don't know what the Kaohsiung incident is, what might it be?
Okay, so I thought you were going to fill it in from Wikipedia.
No? Wait, no, I thought we agreed that I was going to ask you to define it.
Okay, well,
yeah,
that's
let everyone know.
For me. So 1977, I came back to Taiwan. By that time, I had made a connection with the human rights smuggling, the secret smuggling network that was smuggling human rights information through Japan. And the main person was Lynn Miles, Lynnmiles, who was just like 5 years older than me, but he died in 2015.
Right.
So it was really, this network was really, really important over a long period of time. The fact that Lynn Miles was personally so dedicated. And he came to Taiwan in 1962, I came in 1963, but the same thing, he found out that Free China was a total farce. It was free, not China, and he got kicked out of Taiwan and knew all the people who were being arrested at that time in 1970 and 71 and started an underground human rights smuggling network. So when I came back in 1977, I had gotten linked into that network. And also with the help of Tenju. Okay, so you know who Tenju is, right? Mm. You can throw in a picture of her there.
Sure.
She was the gadfly. She was the young gadfly of the opposition in 1975. And so when I came back to Taiwan, she really took over my life, although she's 1 year younger than me. She really took over my life and sent me to meet all these political prisoners. And then I was at the Zhongli incident. But then after the Zhongli incident, she took me with her to the Provincial Assembly where there was an inquest on it. Zhongli incident was a riot, the first riot against KMT election ballot box stuffing. That was in November of 1977. And my research assistant was arrested in relation to this. Okay, so it got personal for me.
Yes, it did.
Yeah, it got personal, and I went with Tenju to the provincial assembly, and then so pretty much the secret police were onto me before that, and I could describe a little more of how we were smuggling, but you can ask me later.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so I fell in with Tenju and other opposition people. And then when the secret police wanted to kick me out of the country, I still had some time on my visa. They were obviously not going to renew my visa in October. So I had some time to find a solution, and that was marry a political prisoner. Yeah. Okay? So that suggestion also came from Tenju.
Oh.
And so I did.
Okay.
I did.
I've heard many theories about what actually happened. That was
I don't know how much detail you want to get into, but you asked me, I'll tell you all.
I'll ask you after the interview.
I slept with him before I married him,
okay?
Okay. Okay, so at least I knew he was competent in some respects, right?
Yeah, we can go.
I have to tell you that marriage is the death of romance. Okay, I can tell you that too.
Okay,
right?
We can go into that after.
Yeah.
But I heard many theories. For example, my grandma was saying that you saved the man you married.
Well, maybe I did later. Yeah.
But you intentionally saved him. Like the reason you married him was to save him. But
I wanted to save him. But I at that point it was not. Yes, I did marry him to save him. It looked like he was going to be arrested.
Yes.
So we ran and got married. Maybe I wouldn't have married him if I waited a little longer, right?
Yes.
Because we were having issues, we were having issues already.
Okay.
But I married him to keep myself from getting kicked out of the country.
Yes. So, yeah, because you know what my grandma said? My grandma said, 你非常的伟大. 然后 she I forgot the specific words, but she was really I've never heard her speak so highly about anyone, and she made you seem like the best person in the world. Maybe you are. I'm just saying. No,
I don't think so. But in that situation, okay.
Yes.
So I get this a lot.
She glamorized the situation.
I'm always afraid to talk to people too much because I'm afraid I might fall off the pedestal.
Okay.
I'm afraid if I say something leftist, I'm going to fall off the pedestal. But I do have, because of the importance of that moment, because of what I did at that moment when everybody was arrested. Because
that was a very important thing.
Spearhead of the human rights movement at that time.
Wow.
Yeah. So what your grandmother said is the impression of people over 50, and I don't have to. I don't have to be a paragon of virtue.
Yes.
Okay, actually, I'm kind of glad.
No need to change that.
No, I want to change this up to you a little bit because
okay.
I do really still have a feminist perspective. And the feminist perspective is, not monogamy and not only men are running around, but, like freedom for women. So when I wrote my biography, people always ask me why I married Shih Ming-teh, always ask me. So I did put into my biography a lot of my personal relationships, other marriages, other affairs. To spice it up, but not just that. Spice it up for the new generation.
So you were a player. I said you were a player. I didn't want to look like a paragon of virtue.
So
you were a player.
The paragon of virtue.
I know. So you were a player. Do you know what I mean when I say that?
Yeah, you could say that, right? Yeah, okay. You could say that, but I wanted to break this mold of the long-suffering wife, okay?
Okay.
And I hate this. So he's been in jail for 10 years. I'm going to wait for him while he's in jail for 10 years.
Wow.
Well, I wouldn't wait for him for 10 days, okay? And I didn't
this
marry
isn't funny.
him.
Sorry, this isn't funny.
I married him. Is that funny? But I married him to keep him out of jail.
Yeah.
But as I said, when I married him, I said, look, I'm not going to be your jail. He had lots of other liaisons, which I did take exception to, okay?
Yes.
He had lots of other liaisons, but I said, I'm not going to be your jail. And I'm not going to be your jail either.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be your jail, and you're not going to be my jail.
Right.
Right. Okay, so I wasn't long suffering waiting for him for 10 years. I lived with a German for 5 years. Let's see, I won't go into everything else, but basically, what everybody took exception to is I lived with a guy from China for 2 years.
Right.
That really made people angry. The German didn't make people angry, but that I lived with the Chinese for 2 years. At one time, I thought I would maybe go join the Chinese Democratic Movement.
I see.
But,
well.
Yeah, but the guy didn't have the guts, okay? The guy didn't have the guts to do it. Okay.
Okay.
Or else I would have.
I'm unsure how much I'm skipping the timeline here, but
well, we haven't really gone into what happened in the
Kaohsiung incident. Yeah, okay? Exactly. Okay, Let's go into that.
We got to finish that up.
Yes.
So I came back to Taiwan in 1977. I was immediately in all this rising organization and there really was a rising current of people getting out of jail because a lot of political prisoners were let out of jail after Chiang Kai-shek died in 1975. Plus, we were already on the second generation of young people who believe, so 中华民国, Republic of China, it is free China. I mean, so it's like the historical memory of 228 had faded, even though in the 1970s there's still lots of people getting arrested. But the young people, they believed we actually do have elections. We actually do have a Republic of China. Now, another aspect of that, because after the government was kicked out, Republic of China was kicked out of the United Nations, the legitimacy of the ROC went down a lot. So there were people who were pro-China who were challenging the government. There were lots of different kinds of challenges. And at that time, there was kind of a strategic alliance between the pro-PRC and the pro-Taiwan independence people. So that was part of the rise of the human rights and also the challenge to the government. And then you add to that the fact that everybody knew from the news that the U.S. was going to recognize China. Okay, so in the 1977 already, there's beginning unrest. There's the Zhongli incident. The Zhongli incident did not result in blood, which is very important. That was the populace burnt down a police station. I was there as they watched it burning. The populace did burn down a police station in protest over the government taking in and the police not persecuting one of the people who was stuffing the ballot boxes, a school principal. So that was the source. It was election protest in 1977, the Zhongli incident in November. So so Jiang Jingguo let a lot of opposition people get elected.
Yeah.
And then that really pushed the ball rolling some more. And then for the election of 1978, December, the opposition really organized and planned an alliance,
right.
Like a united front.
Yeah.
And Shih Ming-teh was at the center of that.
Yes.
So I married him, and then I didn't know he became basically one of the spearheads of the democratic movement and one of the leadership of five, and certainly the most militant one.
Mm-hmm.
And people say I encouraged him, but I never thought that I encouraged him.
Right.
But probably I gave him a level of protection. He probably would have been arrested earlier if he hadn't been married to me.
Yeah.
Because I knew all the news people. I was, hooked in somewhat with the U.S. Embassy. And so, probably from the point of view of the security agencies, I was kind of a protection for him.
Wow.
And then for 1 year, after the U.S. recognized the PRC, there was a real fear that China was going to take over Taiwan. And this was part of the underlying push, the underlying motivation for pushing for the voice of the Taiwanese. And that grew up, it really challenged martial law.
Yeah.
Until through 1979, through the end of 79, and then the government did an agent provocateur type action, set off the riot in Kaohsiung, which was like a really big event, okay? And that was the Kaohsiung incident, which was basically an agent provocateur, but there was really like 150,000 people there, probably, at any one time, tens of thousands of people.
I guess, what are some, noticeable impacts / effects that you've observed coming from the Kaohsiung incident?
Well, so the Kaohsiung incident then was the major event. It gave the government the excuse for a total crackdown. Yeah. They arrested hundreds of people.
Yep.
They put 60 people on trial for supposedly for beating policemen, which was all made up, and then 8 people on trial for sedition.
Right.
And then I was kicked out of the country just on January 15th, just 5 days after Kaohsiung incident. Mm-hmm. In fact, less than 5 days. And then I went on a publicity tour, not just tour, drive.
Yeah.
Strongly aided by all the Taiwanese Americans.
Sounds good.
Okay, but I have to say I knew a little more about the international press than I did. But basically it was from the Kaohsiung incident, whole trip around the U.S. with my mother, then trip around. I went to Hong Kong first, which was a very important move, which the Taiwanese Americans did not understand. Mm-hmm. The Taiwanese Americans did not understand that basically the Asian news is issued from Hong Kong, and even in the news from Taiwan. And I knew most of those news people who'd been in Taiwan. So I jumped off the airplane. I jumped off in Tokyo when we were transiting, although my ticket, which was given to me by the KMT, went to Los Angeles. I jumped off and went to Hong Kong for 3 days.
Nice.
And that made a big impact on the news.
Nice.
And then I met up with my family, but then with all the Taiwanese Americans, and we did a huge blitz, and they petitioned Congress. And so it's basically, I knew a lot of them I'd known before, the people in San Francisco. Mm-hmm. Of course, I knew before. I'd been a member of the club there.
Yeah.
And it was this whirlwind tour where the Taiwanese Americans were all mobilized, and about 500 people were put on the blacklist. Mm. Although most people would not come out publicly because, they were afraid. Obviously, there were people getting kicked off in the U.S., right? Yeah. Wen Chun later was murdered when he went back to Taiwan. So, and there were people, traffic accidents were suspicious in the U.S., so it's not surprising that Taiwanese were afraid, but still probably about 500 people were involved.
I see.
And that created it created quite a lot of news in the U.S.
Yeah.
And that indirectly forced the KMT to hold an open trial.
Yeah.
It forced the KMT to hold an open trial for the Kaohsiung incident defendants.
Right.
And then that changed in Taiwan a huge amount, because the local press covered it. Mm-hmm. So the Government Information Office was kind of in a quandary. It was just after the Jimmy Carter period, and they claimed, okay, we're going to have a fair trial, we're going to have an open trial.
Yeah.
The foreign press signed up to go, and then the local press said, well, we got to go too. So you can see when you come back to Taiwan that for 10 days, the newspapers had almost verbatim coverage of the court process.
Wow.
And of course, in the meanwhile, Lin Yishong's family was murdered also. Okay. Which was also influenced the trial proceedings. It really shook a huge amount of people.
Yeah.
And most people who were in politics realized that the KMT had done it. I mean, the KMT had
I think I recall hearing something. I recall hearing my grandparents talk about something similar.
Yeah.
Well, the same thing. I just
say?
don't remember the names. Well, they told me, like, I guess they expressed their shock / anger towards the KMT. Yeah. But obviously, it's just like their dissatisfaction, if you will.
Yeah. Well, the security, you have to understand the mentality of security agencies. And I understood a little bit indirectly from knowing political prisoners and also directly interacting with them a few times, is that, they feel the people are just ants beneath their feet. Mm-hmm. And they can do anything they want.
Right.
And they don't do everything because it's like a matter of face or something, but they don't even really care what the Ministry of Foreign Affairs thinks, right? The Ministry of Foreign Affairs is trying to look good for the foreigners.
Yes.
But they don't even care. I think at that time, they were also in a struggle for succession to Jiang Jingguo. And the point is, you have to show you're ruthless to have the strength to take over from Jiang Jingguo, because Jiang Jingguo had no successor, although probably one of his sons was in with the security agencies. Yeah. So you have to understand the Lin family murders in that context, more like North Korea, something North Korea would do. And they had North Korean type institutions, secret assassin training and things like that. Okay, but the Lin family murders also really shook mainlanders. They're not just Taiwanese, but they really shook mainlander supporters and Taiwanese who supported the KMT. From a little bit of contact I had, they really shook them. So although the intent was to terrify and put everybody in their place and realize we can murder not just you, we can murder your family, overall it had the opposite effect.
Yeah.
It had the opposite effect.
Right.
And then plus the coverage in the newspapers, 10 days, really reporting what the democratic movement said in black and white. And all the high school students were reading it, junior high.
Yeah.
Kids, everybody could read it. So if you talk to people
news.
who later, you talk to people who later became like activists or pro-DPP and all that, a lot of them will talk about reading the Kaohsiung incident content in 1980.
It's undoubtedly
March
very
1980.
great.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so that was like a watershed. And from the point of view of the opposition, we thought like everything is crushed.
Yeah.
But actually it came back pretty fast.
Right.
And two of the wives of those arrested got into the legislature and National Assembly with high vote. Yeah. So the KMT also got a kind of shock, I think.
Yeah. Well,
okay,
I guess
where do you want to go from there?
For the audience, Miss Linda really wanted to tell everyone about this, so there you go. I guess
there you go.
I think we're an hour in, so we might have to move on to more identity focused questions.
Okay, but let me just say this: that the DPP grew out of the democratic movement, and the wave of people who really set up the DPP were the lawyers for the trial. So it pretty much step by step developed from there. The DPP was set up in 1986, but the Kaohsiung incident also, before that, was already playing the Taiwan identity card.
Yeah.
And so Taiwan identity was there all the time. People speaking Taiwanese and feeling oppressed by the mainlanders. But this is when, after the Kaohsiung incident, the tide began to change.
Right.
Okay, so it didn't just change when the KMT stepped down, but it just kept accreting since then.
So I guess to that, maybe it's a really big jump of a question, but what does being Taiwanese mean to you?
Well, for me, it means I get a lot of senior benefits.
Okay.
Because I just got because I hear as a senior, but
Right.
Just this last year, May, May of 2023, I got my Taiwan citizenship without giving up my U.S. citizenship by reason of special contribution.
Yes.
I probably could have done it 5 years earlier.
Right.
But I hated
Congrats.
I hated that spiky spiky screw thing on the passport and the ID card and all that. So I don't know.
Congrats!
Like
Congratulations.
Yeah, just like negative feeling on my part. I didn't go for citizenship until I thought, okay, I
it's
go
all
for
good.
benefits.
Right.
But no, I did. I felt like it's time. It's past time because a lot of my friends and one who had also been involved in the democratic movement of American got Taiwan citizenship. I said, okay, I got to go for Taiwan citizenship.
Yeah.
And so for me, okay, look, I'm a white Taiwanese, right?
Yeah.
Which is pretty much a red herring. Like nobody expects a Taiwanese to be white.
Right.
No. So I don't know, for Taiwanese Americans, I'm not quite sure what to say, but for me as an American Taiwanese, I'm looking at it from another side. And I guess the first thing, of course, is you have to recognize that there's a Taiwan culture that is different from what the PRC is plugging.
Sure.
Right? But now, if you really understand this in anthropological and historical and cultural background, Taiwan and Fujian is the ancient culture of China. Okay, up before the Mongol invasions.
Sure.
That influenced North China. So really, ancient Chinese is much closer to Taiwanese than Mandarin is.
Yeah.
Mandarin.
I remember you telling me about this. Yeah.
I remember you talking about this. Okay, so Mandarin is the bastardization of Chinese.
Okay.
Okay, in one linguistic account, it's a pidgin language.
Right.
It's a combined language of the nomads from the north who took over China and ancient Chinese, but they could not pronounce a lot of the original Chinese. So although ancient Chinese is basically the southern dialects, mostly now Taiwanese, the northern barbarians mangled it. Okay, they mangled it, and then Mandarin came out of that.
Yeah.
Out of that. So it's Mandarin that is the Kensa, is the deviation, really not Taiwanese. So I have this kind of like a really anthropological cultural background that Taiwanese is the language of like 50, 60 million people in China, at least in past generations. And there's a few tens of millions of overseas Chinese people in Thailand and Malaysia and all that. Who speak Hokkien dialects, similar dialects. So it does really represent much more the ancient culture of China, and especially southern China.
The Taiwanese identity encompasses more. I like that. I said I like that. It's very interesting.
It's more authentic.
Yes, it is.
It's much more authentic.
And it's cooler.
It's
cooler. It's cooler. Yes.
It's more expressive. It doesn't have all those multiple homonyms.
More. It's less arbitrary as well. I feel like.
Yes, it's less arbitrary.
Yes.
Because the problem with Mandarin is they wiped out the word. One big problem is they wiped out the T and it. Pot, pot, pop.
Yeah.
They wiped out 3 word endings, and that makes huge numbers of words into homonyms. And you can't tell which word you're talking about. This is a big problem for foreigners learning Chinese. And it also Chinese is not as descriptive and doesn't have as many adjectives and verbs as Taiwanese has. Okay. So if you look at it from that perspective, and, of course I did hang out a lot with people who research Taiwanese, who study Taiwanese. And so it looks like Taiwanese does not have a written language, but actually Taiwanese has a lot of written language, which is ancient Chinese, if you research it.
Yeah, right? So I know what you mean. Then,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Okay, so Taiwan versus China is in a position similar to Ukraine versus Russia.
Yeah.
which is a little scary because Ukraine is actually the heartland of ancient
I didn't know that.
Russian.
Oh.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Okay, so I mean, when Russia Russia also tried to suppress the language of Ukraine, but that's like suppressing your ancestors.
Yeah.
The same as China is suppressing Taiwan. It's really your ancestors. Now, of course, that includes a lot of what we could call superstition.
Yes.
Taoism, Taoist beliefs, kinds of ancestor worship, mysticism, shamanism. Us anthropologists are fascinated with the Danggi, the shamans. I always love to see them in the countryside or elsewhere. There's still a lot of shamans in Taiwan, and they're coming out of the woodwork in China.
Right.
But there's all these kind of fascinating customs that have been pretty much gone by the way. They're not really practiced anymore, but Taiwanese movies are bringing them back to some degree.
Awesome.
I don't know if you saw this Taiwanese movie, really great Taiwanese movie, about and it also is like a pun on homosexuals and all that. Not a pun, it's a spoof on this. So this homosexual kid gets killed by gangsters, and then his spirit takes over a policeman who has to marry him in order to free him from the cycle of...
Okay, but I don't understand that. Yeah.
You haven't seen this movie?
No, I have not.
Oh, it's a great one. It's a great one. So the movie is how the policeman solves the murder case with the help of the ghost. But to do that, he has to marry the ghost. Now, okay, so there used to be a custom in Taiwan, if an unmarried woman dies, the family, because a woman is not allowed to go to the ancestors of her parental family. She has to go with the ancestors of the family she's married to. This is very sexist. Traditional Taiwan culture is very sexist. So the family puts some money into a red envelope and throws it on the ground, and then they watch, and whoever picks up the envelope has to marry her. As a ghost. You haven't heard that?
I have not.
You haven't heard about ghost marriage? You're not up on your Chinese culture.
I am not.
You got to read Jordan. You've got to read David Jordan. God's Ghosts and Ancestors. He was my teacher. David Jordan. God's Ghosts and Ancestors.
Okay, David Jordan. Okay. I will. I will read it. I definitely will read this. This book I will read. This book I will read.
This is basically the customs of 2 generations ago.
Got it.
So in this recent Taiwanese movie, the family doesn't really know the life of the young kid, but they put out the red envelope because he wasn't married. Somebody's got to marry him, and it's picked up by a guy, and they accept whoever picks it up's got to marry the ghost. So the policeman marries the ghost, and then the story proceeds from there of finding who murdered him. But there's a lot of fun things in the middle.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds interesting. Oh, wait, it's not...
of course, the policeman being anti-gay and has to face his homophobia. Yeah, this is kind of like with a modern twist.
Oh,
right?
yeah, that sounds really, like... I can see the nuances. And it ties to Taiwanese. I think that's cool. Then,
it's
I guess...
on Netflix. You can find it on... it was on Netflix. Yeah.
Okay, well, I will go look at it. I'll go look at it. Then I guess, like, since we're running out of time, next question would be...
can close it up.
Next question, I guess 2 more questions, 3 more questions. One, identity-wise, do you feel more American or Taiwanese?
I still feel that I'm the American anti-war activist. But my friends who are Americans tell me, like, I act like a Taiwanese, but only partially. Okay, there's lots of things. Like, Taiwanese never talk about their personal lives. It gets really boring. You go to feasts and you eat feast after feast with them until, your stomach can't take it anymore.
Right.
And then you don't learn anything about them personally.
Yeah.
So on the other hand, Americans are always pouring out their guts, right? And we'll talk about their sex lives and their lovers and all kinds of things.
Right.
So as an anthropologist, I feel like I have more of a right to dig. I like to dig. And family issues and relationship issues, that's all very, very interesting. So I have to say, personality, I'm still an American, a big mouth American, and I'm still an anthropologist who likes to dig. And so I don't really think, as a personality, I'm not that Taiwanese. except I probably accepted a lot of the Taiwanese culture in that be polite.
Yeah.
Don't confront people directly. But I still, I'm really known for this in Taiwan. I'm known for confronting people right out about their political views. Right. And so, but I feel this is my leftist perspective.
Right.
This is what goes with a leftist perspective. You don't mince around. You don't, beat around the bush. You say directly without personal animosity. The other thing is you have to do it without personal animosity.
Yeah.
Whereas Taiwanese are going to say nice things to your face and then stab you in the back, but not as bad as China.
Yeah.
Okay. China is really known for that.
You gotta be more.
They're going to say things behind your back.
Authentic. You gotta be authentically frank. If that's
Yeah,
I
as
agree.
a policy.
That's
no,
okay.
I have cut it down quite a bit because I know Taiwanese have become so conservative, and it's really what Europeans have told me coming to Taiwan, that Taiwan is asexual, and it is. I mean, even though the girls are wearing virtually showing their whole legs, and they look like they're dressed to kill, but then we have the Me Too movement. Like any guy who makes any kind of a pass is like to get slapped with a Me Too, and they always assume the guy is wrong. Okay, which may or may not be the case, right?
Right.
And foreigners often misinterpret and come into the Me Too also. Mm-hmm. So Taiwan is kind of like strange. You've got real sexual liberation now, much more equality between men and women. But then, on the other hand, the Me Too movement considers any kind of an expression of sexual interest. They consider that a sin. Come on. So now we look. What's the birth rate for Taiwan, Korea, Japan?
Low. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's like half of reproduction. I mean, it's half of replacement. It's under half of replacement.
Yeah,
this is happening around the whole world, but it's happening really bad. Mm-hmm. And I think we could cut it off here and have another talk about that. Okay?
Yes, we can.
What I think about the youth culture,
right?
And I do think there's a problem that the youth are really strawberries. Mm-hmm. Even the old Taiwan independence is strawberries. They're softening like a soft guava. They do not really take on issues. The DPP is suppressing the Taiwan independence movement because they don't want anything provocative that will lead the U.S. to blame them. And in a way, I think it's too late. I don't think they can get out of this limbo. They can't get out of the limbo that the U.S. has put them in with the Shanghai Communique. Okay?
Nice.
So, it's I think that Taiwanese should realize that Trump is a disaster.
Okay. Then I guess sorry. Oh, guess the second to final question.
Okay.
What advice, would you give to your 20-year-old self? Or younger self?
Once somebody asked me that, and I said, and I think what I answered was highly questionable, but I said that if I knew what I know now about class oppression, I would have been a terrorist.
A terrorist? Okay, yeah.
Yes,
maybe let's not encourage terrorism.
I regret saying that.
Yes.
I regret saying that.
Good.
And actually, my current position is rather more, I'm a pacifist.
Okay,
great. It's you can be killed but not kill others.
Yes.
And the problem with terrorism is that it leads to more terrorism and more violence both ways.
Yes.
So terrorism is not a solution.
Good.
But if I know what I know now, if I knew then what I know now, I'm sure I would have given up on the democratic process a lot earlier.
Okay. So advocate as a pacifist.
Well, now I perhaps advocate pacifism because any kind
advocate for pacifism.
Violence,
I like that.
Any kind of violence leads to more violence.
Okay.
And it doesn't solve or it doesn't reconcile people. So actually, I've had a suggestion for the Taiwan independence movement that nobody accepts, but let me say, my suggestion is that they form a Dare to Die group of about 20-25 older Taiwanese and let them have all their biographies written out, go to Europe, meet a lot of people in Europe in human rights, and then go to China and get arrested. Okay? Because China now has the anti-succession law, and basically rub it in China's face. We are here to say China does not have the right to suppress Taiwan and take over Taiwan, and we are in favor of Taiwan independence. So my view is that if Taiwanese really have determination, they should walk into the lion's den, and it doesn't mean they're going to succeed from this, but it's going to have a huge propaganda effect.
Awesome.
That you dare to put your life on the line.
I like that.
Probably won't die. You'll probably be in jail for 10 years.
I like that.
And maybe die in jail. But you have to show you are ready to put your life on the line. You need to challenge the Chinese legal system, as insofar as it is a legal system.
Right.
And mostly they put people in hotel detention, not put them in jail right away.
Yeah.
They put them in jail later. And inspire other people, and also inspire people in China. So, Taiwan independence movement, if you really have guts, do something like this, which will not hopefully lead to the bombs coming down from China shooting missiles and killing a lot more people. That's my view, that China is going to eventually do an armed invasion.
Cool.
So it's better to head it off with propaganda in your own direction. At least you have the propaganda helping you. Right. Okay, that's my basic. You have another. Now, next question.
Oh, final question. Can you name your life story?
You mean given an English name?
Sure.
Okay, well, actually, I did that because I had the subtitle of my book in English, and it's called "A Beautiful View from the Brink." And when I decided to go back to Taiwan after 1975, seeing the rise of the democratic movement, and I decided in 1977 to go back and join the democratic movement and leave my husband, I had a feeling like I was stepping off a cliff. So maybe I'm very lucky I didn't get killed. I'm very lucky I have a very respected old age. It's very lucky for me, but if I were to sum it up, I'd say I dared to jump from the brink.
That I hope that doesn't imply any suicidal thoughts.
No, well, it's not suicidal, but at the time it felt suicidal.
I see.
I mean, I knew I would have no security. I know what you mean. I've lived most of my life with very poor financial security. Right. Even until now. Right. And my son refused to support me. He said I abandoned him. He's not going to support me. He has lots of money. He has 5 houses, but he's not going to support me. I ran out of money in 2022, and I do live at a rather low level, which is good. I've been able to live at a fairly low level all my life and live well. I live pretty well at a low level.
That's good.
Yeah, and now I'm supported basically by the DPP and by human rights organizations now for the second year. And I did make some money this last year, a translation for a book from China. Nice. So maybe I'm going to get more translation work from China, medical translation. Right. But I don't think I can depend on that. And so as I move into my old age now, I can't say I regret it because it came out well for me. The main thing I could say to other people, there's fewer and fewer good jobs. That's definite. AI is coming. The likeliness of getting a good job and getting well paid is low. So you may as well become a social activist, dedicate yourself to something interesting. Right. I mean, there's so many people doing things they're not interested in. You'll probably survive okay. Survive okay just living off the throwaways from a rich society. Awesome. And then people will respect you if you stick with it and you do some good things. Awesome. Okay, so that's a kind of advice for social activists.
Awesome. Then I guess, the follow-up question to what you said you would get to at the end of this interview was, how do you see Taiwanese American organizations make an impact today? Or what do you advise Taiwanese?
Well, nowadays they're pretty irrelevant because the DPP does its own foreign policy. The foreign affairs has been very much affected by people like Yang Huang Meixing, who came back from the States. But the impact of the Taiwanese Americans has all been very conservative. I'm hoping there's a few young Taiwanese Americans who are really going to travel the world and see what happens in other countries. Really get a broad political experience. Go to Guatemala, go to places where there are death squads. Go to places where there is really out and out oppression or where the right wing is rising and understand those political processes. And then maybe you can contribute to Taiwan in some way, either through foreign relations or just by understanding difficult political processes. So there are some Taiwanese, some should go to China. We need more people. There have been a few Taiwan Democratic movement people, one person I knew in particular, who went to China, spent 20, 30 years in China, and then really understands the communist system.
Yeah.
We need people to go to China and understand China, but understand what's happening in lots of ways of the society.
So foster a more holistic understanding of the world.
Global. Global,
exactly.
Really global. Definitely the U.S. is going down in international influence. The military power of the U.S. is likely to stick around for a long time. But in terms of science, in terms of economic forces, China is definitely rising and is challenging the U.S. even in the South Seas. So you have to figure that into the equation for what's going to happen to Taiwan.
Awesome.